Welcome back to the Admirals Esports Solo Shuffle tier list for patch 10.1.7. In this episode, we'll discuss how each class is performing in the current meta. As always, this information is based on the opinions of our expert AWC and Twitch team, so if you're looking for the pros view of the game, look no further. To kick things off, we're going to cover the melees who are dominating this patch. Our first S tier melee class is the Windwalker Monk. They still deal incredible damage, have great survivability, and can hold their own against both casters and melee. They can also set up their own 100-0 combos of an in-cap on the healer and a leg sweep on the DPS, making them deadly in solo shuffle against uncoordinated teams. Our next S tier melee class is the Subtlety Rogue. They did not receive any buffs. The increase in Restoration Druids and decrease in Holy Paladins allow Subtlety Rogues to create far more deadly setups that Restoration Druids cannot deal with, unlike Holy Paladins with Blessing of Sacrifice and Blessing of Protection. Coupled with their incredible burst potential every minute and ability to solo kill with Shadowy Jewel, Sub-Rogues are a very strong, self-reliant carry machine, but only if you know how to play them. Moving on to the A tier, we have a pretty stacked roster, beginning with Unholy Death Knights. Unholy has seen little changes recently, and is still performing well due to its damage and crowd control. However, it is still far too squishy to be moved up to the S tier. Although receiving a damage nerf and Necrotic Aura, this has seen Death Knights picking up other potent talents such as Strangulate and Spellboarder. Next, we have Survival Hunters, who are still sitting in the A tier due to being very strong into mages, warlocks, and wrestler druids, which the latter has in abundance. Survival can struggle into melee lobbies though, thus not earning them the S tier spot. Another class who is still remaining in the A tier are Demon Hunters, who have received some quality of life changes. These are I-Beam being uninterruptible, and increasing the duration of Chaos Nova when using the Isaiah Prey talent. Demon Hunters have also gained some damage to Essence Break, allowing them to place in different builds if needed. Despite these changes, Demon Hunters will not be moving up to the S tier due to how vulnerable they are in stuns, which every Sub-Rogue and Windwalker will easily take advantage of. Previously in our B tier, Arms Warriors are now performing well enough to go up to our A tier. Their sustain has been heavily buffed, and they now do incredible consistent damage with Deep Wounds and Bladestorm. However, they are not quite good enough to be placed in the S tier, as they are susceptible to being kited, and they are still excellent targets for casters to kill. Joining Arms are Retribution Paladins, who have also moved up from the B tier. This is thanks to their tankiness into other melees and the huge rain damage they provide. Although lacking a Mortal Strike themselves, the influx of Warriors and Windwalkers covers this weakness, thus boosting rest performance. Ret utility is also very strong once again, as there is less Holy Paladins to overlap it with as the healer meta has evolved. Our last melee class in the A tier is the Feral Druid, which has also moved up from the B tier. Feral Druids are performing well currently, as they can do great damage to both melee and casters alike. They also synergize very well with metacasters, such as mages and augmentation evokers. Although Ferals did not receive any patch changes, just like Ret Paladins, they have moved up due to the strength of other meta classes. Now let's cover the B tier, starting with Fury, who despite buffs has fallen down. Fury, who is still very light on uptime due to Slaughterhouse, is struggling in the current meta, of highly mobile classes such as Windwalkers and Mages. Couple that with its just being straight up less damage and utility than Arms, and it's just not looking too good for our dual-wielding warriors. Next are Assassination and Outlaw Rogues, who are both struggling in solo shuffle, despite performing better in 3v3. Assassination Rogues have received a 5% damage buff. This has not been enough to help them kill before they succumb to their weak defenses, and slow ramp up damage. Outlaw Rogues are all about control, but it can be difficult to get your team to play off your setups. Additionally, you don't do enough damage on your own to finish the game. Finally, we have the bottom of the barrel C tier melee. These classes can work in these situations, they are generally too squishy for shovel. First up is Enhance. Although Enhance can deal incredible burst damage with Ascendance, it is far too random to be efficient in every lobby. Enhance lacks a Mortal Strike, takes a lot of damage, and also has issues connected to mobile casters like Mages. The other C tier melee is Frost Death Knight, who also suffers from lack of ability, survivability, and the Mortal Strike. Frost Death Knights did receive some buffs to sustain damage, however it is not enough to pull them away from their 1 minute setup playstyle that is not suited to solo shuffle's uncoordinated gameplay. Next up, let's cover how the range classes are faring, beginning with the S tier Augmentation Evoker. After the last hotfix, many people thought Augmentation would fall off due to their nerf to healing and Evan Might being more focused on the Evoker itself. However, all this has done is put more power into the player, allowing Augmentations to one-shot with upheaval even harder and do strong, consistent damage with Eruption, often doing some of the highest damage in the arena. Joining Augmentation in the S tier spot are Arcane Mages. Consistent damage, High Burst, and the biggest execute in the game with Arcane Barrage, Arcane can pack a punch. Couple that with the highest ability of any caster, and you have a target who can avoid all the damage in the world while single-handedly dismantling the enemy team. Next, we have Elemental Shamans, who earn their spot in the S tier simply because they are the anti-caster with groundings, wind shears, and instant damage. And with so many mages and augmentations running rampant, it's clear to see why Ellie is thriving. Elemental also doesn't have any bad lobbies really due to how tanky it is, resulting in you climbing the ladder no matter what's thrown your way. Following the buffs to Rapid Fire and Explosive Shot, Marksman Hunters have risen to the S tier. This is due to their ability to deal significant damage to cloth, leather, and mail targets, essentially countering all other S tier classes. However, Marksman Hunter's damage falls off significantly versus Plate, leading it to struggle in full melee lobbies. Our final S tier caster are Fire Mages, who have almost the same ability as Arcane, just training in the constant sprint for huge range from Flame Cannon. Dealing more spread pressure than Lock and hitting consistent 100k Pyroblast and Fireballs, Fire Mages are dealing unmatched damage, as long as you can kite out well enough with the reduced health from Glass Cannon. Moving on to the A tier, we have Boomkins leading the charge. After being S tier for as long as we can remember, Boomkins have finally been dropped down a tier. This is mainly due to the increase of Mage's power, making them a better choice, and Boomkins only having access to one interrupt, making them unable to shut down Mage's potent setups. However, Boomkins are still very strong in their own right, due to having incredible consistent damage, a powerful 2-minute cooldown to end the game, and the most powerful CC in the game with undispellable Cyclones. Next we have Frost Mages, a strong contender for the A tier, with similar survivability to Arcane Mages and the added utility of an extra Ice Lock. However, their damage output is not as consistent as the other two mage specs, and their two most impactful abilities, Ray of Frost and Glacial Spike, can be easily interrupted, thus making them less of a threat than Fire and Arcane. Now for the B tier, where we only have two classes, the first of those being Beast Mastery Hunter. Although they can do some fantastic damage, Hunter pets are very vulnerable to crowd controls, and with so many Restoration Druids, Augmentations, and Mages on the ladder, being a pet class has never been harder. The main source of damage is always in a Root, Cyclone, or Ring of Frost. Beam Hunters can excel at lower ratings if players are less aware of how to deal with them, however, as you get into higher it becomes increasingly frustrating. Destruction Warlocks are also sitting in the B tier. Although Destro can be played to high rating, it is very squishy and its survival is incredibly map dependent due to thoughtful positioning. Destruction damage can also be easy to shut down, and its consistent damage is nowhere near the other casters. Going into the C tier, we have the other two Warlock specs of Demonology and Affliction. Despite several damage buffs, neither of the specializations have the survivability or time in Shuffle to really start ramping up their damage to score a kill, often relying on dampening to win in the constructed 3v3. Shadow Priests are also joining in at the C tier due to lack of damage, vulnerability to interrupts, and how easy they are to train. With the buffs to Warriors and Demon Hunter, and the already potent Windwalker, Shadow Priests are in a really rough spot at the moment, unless they manage to find themselves in a caster-heavy lobby. Finally, we have D tier for Devastation. This class is just a complete squishy gimmick with its short range, subpar defensives, and very low team utility. Its low consistent damage means it's not ideal in Shuffle, and now that most players know how to survive its burst of Dragon range, it's getting worse by the day. For the healers, we once again turn to Lontar, one of the top support players in Europe, for his thoughts on the best healers in solo Shuffle. Here's what he had to say. For the coveted S tier, we have Restoration Druids sitting alone, knocking Holy Paladins off the podium. With the addition of Trents, Restoration Druids are now doing incredible healing, and it's close to impossible to shut them down. Restoration Druids can also play very aggressive and cause a team to win through a well-placed Cyclone or Bash, but it's not always needed, as they can often win the long game too. Restoration Druids' only weakness is consistent swaps, however this can be hard to coordinate in solo Shuffle. Moving on to the A tier, we have Holy Paladins, who have moved down a tier only because of the strength of Restoration Druids. Holy Paladins are still doing fantastic healing, and can keep teammates alive and aggressive by cycling through Blessings of Protections and Sacrifices. They also have access to the most mana restoration in the game in Shuffle, with Plea and other passives. Additionally, they have good crowd control of Hammer of Justice and Bind or Repentance, which leaves Holy in a very good spot where they want to play aggressive or dampen. Also in the A tier are Holy Priests, who are in a very similar spot to Holy Paladins by having great healing and strong crowd control. Holy Priests also have the additional benefit of large damage through huge Holy Fires. Holy Priests don't quite reach the S tier though, as they do not have any damage reduction which can prove troublesome and dampening, and they have to cast a lot to be effective. Our last A tier healer are Fistweavers. Fistweavers bring strong consistent damage and an interrupt, making them a nightmare for most cloth classes to face. Fistweavers' main weakness is being crowd controlled in the middle of the map, being kited, or being swapped on. However, in Shuffle, this can be hard to coordinate as CC will often break in the chaos of uncoordinated play. Next up is the B tier, where we have healers that are quite niche as they don't work in certain environments and compositions. The first healer in the B tier are Restoration Shamans, who despite being one of the best defensive and disruptive healers with Lasso, Grounding, Wind Shear, and Hex, are struggling in Shuffle. This is because Restoration Shaman is often healing capped and forces their team to play in the Earthen Totem, something that classes like Mages and Rogues cannot do, they would just die if they don't kite. Although they did receive some significant buffs in their Riptide and healing stream, this is unfortunately not enough to compete with the other top healers. Preservation Evokers are also in the B tier. This is because of their awkward 25-yard range, making them not ideal to heal casters who are kiting through the open field. Preservation Evokers can deliver strong damage and crowd control, however they need their team to play around them, which is often too much to ask in Shuffle. Couple that with their vulnerability to getting crowd controlled or even killed, Prez is in a tough spot. Finally, in the C tier, we have Disc Priests. Disc has nothing going for it sadly, with lackluster healing and poor cooldowns despite the buffed shields. Disc also finds itself going out of mana very fast compared to other healers, only finding wins through extreme aggressive play, which is difficult to execute in solo shuffle. Our last healer in the C tier are Casted Mistweaver Monks, who have the opposite problem of Discs. Built for dampening, the Casted Mistweaver doesn't bring anything for its team offensively outside of leg sweep and incap, both which put the Mistweaver in vulnerable positions. Mistweavers are also very susceptible to being interrupted as they have to channel all of their heals, and can be easily crowd controlled by the majority of casters in the game. Mistweaver can do very well on mana though, so if played by a skilled player, they can pull off wins if paired with casters. That's all for today's episode. Be sure to follow Admirals Esports on their website and Twitch channel to stay up to date on upcoming tournaments and your favourite players. Thanks for watching and we'll see you next time.